Hi, nice to meet you. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, my name is Júlia Keresztes, or Keresztes Júlia as we say in Hungarian. I am a
What are you doing
PhD.
here?
I'm doing 5 months as a Fulbright visiting student researcher at UMass, University of Massachusetts Amherst. And I'm doing my PhD in theoretical linguistics in syntax.
So can you tell a bit more about how you learned English? How does your interest originate and what was it like? What was the experience like?
So I started learning English in high school, but I wanted to learn English a little bit before that. Well, I have an older brother and sister who had English classes as young children. So we lived in a little village, and a little bit farther away there was a woman who was teaching English for kids. And I was very little, so I didn't go to classes, but when my parents went to drop my sister and brother off, I went with them. So I saw the teacher, and I think we stayed for a little while, but not too long. But there they got 4 English books. One of them was a collection of Grimm's fairy tales, of an Andersen fairy tales, complete works of Shakespeare, and a 4th one that I don't remember. But then we got, so every book was given to one of the 3 of us, and I got the Shakespeare one, or I wanted the Shakespeare one. So I really loved Shakespeare from an early age on, and it was in English, so I wanted to be able to read it. But then I didn't learn English until high school, because in the little village where I lived until I was 11, there were no English classes, only German. And when we moved to the town that I now call my hometown, in the elementary school that I went there, only those people could learn English who were good enough in German. So it was a little bit of a story how I got to the verse German group, but so the fact is that I couldn't learn English in elementary school. But then when I went to high school, I went to this humanities high school. It was mostly for languages, and we had to learn 2 languages. One of them was German and the other one was English, and they separated the group by name. So we were 28 of us, and they separated the group at half, and I fallen into the first half, which was the English first language and German second. But then on the first English class, they asked us what our level of English is, and then they said, well, we will start with the pre-intermediate headway. And so those of us who have never had any English before couldn't stay in that class, so I had to go over to the German group, where we started from the beginning. So I just hated all of that, because I needed to learn the same stuff that I already knew for like, I don't know, 6-7 years before that. And but I still had, so in the first year we had, the dominant language had 9 classes a week, and the second language had 7, and then so it was a very heavily language oriented high school. And so if you made a language exam and you had a language certificate in your first or dominant language, then you could study the other more. But then I never wanted to have a language certificate in German, so I only had my whatever classes I had. But then one of my in the first year we had a very bad English teacher, but in the second year we got a very good one, who went away on a maternal year in just the half of my 3rd year in high school. So, but I continued to study with her in private classes, and I think she is the one who taught me English, because that's all the English that I've learned is from that 2 years, or 3, because I kept going to her for private lessons for the whole entire time of the high school. And then I had a language exam and a language certificate in English at the end. So I got it in 2013. No, 2000. I have no idea when. So it was my 11th grade when I got the certificate. And then, so I wanted to be a doctor until the 10th grade, but then my mother said something, and then I couldn't anymore, and so I had to look for something to do instead of being a doctor. And there was this website that advertised, that kind of like described all the things that you can study and how much you make with that and whatever. And so I was just skimming through it, and no, I don't want to be a lawyer, I don't want to be this or that or whatever. And then I went to the English major, and I saw that at the time we were studying Shakespeare in high school also, and I guess, oh no, we were already over Shakespeare. We were at around Blake and Keats and Shelley, and I really liked them. I also loved Shakespeare, and so I saw the English major, and then they learn a lot of literature and linguistics. I loved linguistics from I loved grammar. I didn't know what linguistics was, but I loved grammar. And I thought, and then I saw that people who learn English well can be translators, and translators earn a lot of money. So that's how I chose the English major. And so I started to prepare for the entrance exam, because Hungary had entrance exam to universities. They stopped it when I went to the university, but a year before that you had to go through a whole examination. You had to learn or had to know a lot of things about the literature, language, and the history of the country. So I started to study for the entrance exam. So I read a lot of English poetry and novels, and so yes. And then I got into the university, and then it turns out that I'm not a literary person. I am. I love literature, but I'm not really PhD material for literature, I think. I met my professor who was teaching me syntax, and that's when I fell in love with linguistics, and since then I'm doing linguistics. And
what kind of difficulties do you have while learning English? You love grammar, but did you really enjoy learning grammar back at school?
Yes. So we didn't have Hungarian grammar classes, but I loved German. Well, so I started out with loving German. So when I did study the German in the village elementary school, I really loved it because my teacher was focusing on grammar, and we had these whole nice tables, I don't know, which I really love. I love tables. I love organizing stuff in very structured things, and so I didn't feel too much difficulty with it ever. It was kind of like, that's a language that was kind of my second language that was already put in my brain, because with German I had some difficulties to remember this, remember that, but now I cannot recall too much difficulty with English.
And what is the general attitude to learning English in Hungary, and what languages are offered? So it's English and German, I guess.
English and German are the most common. Everybody wants to learn English. And so the generation of my youngest brother, who is 15 now, they learn English from video games and from the internet. So I think that my 15-year-old brother knows more English than my 25-year-old brother does. So, but everybody, it's kind of like now it's a thing that you have to do. If you don't speak English, you cannot really do anything in the workforce or anywhere. But so I think 5-10 years ago now they started so before the evaluation of language programs in Hungary, also in bigger cities they also offered French and Italian. Next to German, but it's mostly the capital city that did that. In my school I could have learned Italian, but I didn't want to. But yes, so French and Italian is very common, and about 10 years ago they started offering Japanese and Chinese, so some of these Asian languages as well. But everybody, and sometimes Russian. Russian is becoming more popular because we have more economic connections with Russia nowadays. So, and it is really so those people who can speak English and Russian can get really good jobs. So that's kind of what we have now.
And what does your research have to deal with? Does it have to do with English and language?
So it's I'm working in the framework that is called generative linguistics, that was developed by Chomsky in the 1960s, 50s, 60s, and so we at this school believe that all languages have the same structure and language is a biological thing in our head or a genetic thing. So it is just like any other biological thing that you learn, like seeing, hearing, and recognizing color and stuff like that. So what we do is we try and look at. So English is very well studied because it was started out on English, and it was most of the big scholars are English speaking. So that's how English is very well studied. But then there are some other understudied languages that can shed light on this universal grammar. We call it universal grammar because everybody has the same grammar. And so what I am doing is there is a well-known phenomena in English that is called pipe piping, which is the movement of syntactic like elements inside a sentence. Like in Hungarian, if you want to ask a question, and in English also. So if you have a sentence like I met two nice boys, then if you want to ask about the object of the meeting, you would say, who did you meet? So you have to get the thing, and then you have to bring it to the beginning of the sentence. And pipe piping is when you don't just move one thing, but you can move more. Like in English, it would be pictures of whom did you see on the wall. And that has some restrictions in every language, which is kind of informing the universal grammar. And what we generative linguists do is we try to make it. So we try to make the whole structure as fine-tuned as it can get. So that's why I'm usually looking at Hungarian, but then I am trying to come up with a structure that is universal. So that's what I'm doing.
So you believe that we are all equally good at learning languages then? Is there such a thing as talent for languages or no?
I don't think that, so we don't say anything about this. We say that the way we learn language is universal. So every child learns the same way. And that's why if you have so if your parents are not speaking the same language, then you grow up bilingual, and both of those languages you will speak as your mother tongue. Because there is a certain age under which if you are exposed to a language, then that could be a native language of yours. So it might not be just bilingual, you can be multilingual. Because I know of a couple where the mother is, I think, German, the father is Spanish, but the grandparents are not both Spanish and both German. So the grandkids, so the girls' children, speak at least 3 languages as a native language because each grandparent taught them their own language. So it's just so we call it a critical age. Which is 12, and if you study a language before you are 12, then you have the capacity to speak it at a native level. So if you start to take your kids to English classes at a very young age, then they will develop English just as they develop their own mother tongue. So,
and what can you say about switching personalities when we switch languages? Do you think it's really true? Do you feel like a different person when you switch between Hungarian and English?
With myself, I have never experienced it. That would be a very schizophrenic feeling. But I never really kind of like paid attention to it. But I had a teacher, or most of my teachers at the university, at the English major. So there was this guy who we all thought was gay because he spoke in a very high-pitched voice when he spoke in Hungarian. He dressed nicely, like he wore colors of like peach and like violet that people like men in Hungary don't usually do. And so the first time I had a class with him, he was carrying this the old-timey projector, you know, that you have to plug in and then it's like a bright screen and it projects to the And so he was carrying, and it's very heavy, and he was carrying it, and then he stood at the door and he was like, "Who are you waiting for?" And we said the name of the teacher, and then he came in, "Oh God." He put it down on the table, and then he said, "Next time somebody else come to 134 and bring this because it's so heavy." And then he put it down and switched to English, and he was like, "Hi, my name is Tomáš Korát. I'm gonna be your teacher." And it was just like, I said, "What? This person is not the same in like one language. He's like this kind of person, and when he switches to English, his voice lowered. So it's like, I don't know, because I cannot really listen to my own voice. You have heard me speak Hungarian. Was it different?
Yeah, a bit different, I guess. Yeah.
So I guess there is something different between the two. I mean, I might feel sometimes. So I don't know if I feel like a different person, but a lot of times I feel like I can express my feelings better in English than in Hungarian. So that is kind of related, I think. And it's a very weird feeling when I want to talk to people who don't speak English, and I just want to say something. But also when what I noticed is that there are some cases when I think I have more synonyms in English, and I know how the fine little differences between one and the other, and we don't have that in Hungarian, and that's why I sometimes don't know how to express that little, just a little bit more refined feeling that I have. I only know it in English how to say it. And so it's sometimes it's a weird feeling.
And finally, what advice can you give to people trying to learn a language, especially at an older age?
So my advice to people who try to learn any language after the critical period, which is most of us, is not to be afraid of talking, because everybody makes mistakes, and language learning is not about perfect speech, it's about speaking. So whenever you learn a language, even so native speakers will always understand, because language usually aims at getting through a message. So communication is not about perfectness, it's getting through the meaning, and you can do that whatever way you want to. And also don't stress about pronunciation, because many people stress about pronunciation when it's very different from their own language, and just enjoy it.
Yes, so good luck to you and have a good time. Enjoy the rest of your time here.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.